Hello, BookTube. It's Roz. It's a sunny Sunday afternoon here in Sussex, and I'm recording a video ready for Tag Tuesday. It's a tag video, and it's called Round the World in 80 Prompts tag. Like around the world in 80 days, but 80 prompts. And thank you for that slightly punny, nice title, Mark, of Book Time with Elvis, because this is one of Mark's tags, and I was tagged by Alan of Big Hard Books and Classics. Thank you, Alan. So, 8 prompts all beginning with T, and the first one is theatre. Do you read plays? Tell us one of your favourites. Now, BookTube has got me into reading more plays than I ever have before because Tilly of Tilly's Shelf and I decided at the beginning of 2020 we would read a book every month that year and make a BookTube video about it, and we have. We call them Discussing Drama, and we've carried on into 2021, and it's been a delight reading so many plays because I've always enjoyed going to the theatre, but as it happened, of course, this past year, I haven't been able to do that. So, um, uh, how fortunate that we decided to read a load instead. Now, I've got lots of favourite playwrights, lots of favourite plays, and I'm not going to do the sort of Shakespeare, Wilde, Shaw, Chekhov, Beckett, all the Greeks, Greek tragedies, all those. All of those I love, but I'm going to pick one of the ones that Tilly and I have read that I hadn't heard of before and wouldn't have read if it weren't for this project, and that's A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry, and she's a groundbreaking Black American dramatist who I didn't really know about and had never read anything by, and what a revelation! Brilliant play. Number 2, travel. Sadly, we can't travel these days, but do you have a favourite travel writer or travel book for armchair adventures? Okay, I'm going to cheat and do 2. The first is one from 1965, and it's by Dervla Murphy, and it was her first travel book, and it's called, let me get this right, Full Tilt, Ireland to India with a Bicycle. And she wrote it about a journey she made in 1963, where she did go from Ireland, where she lived, all the way to Delhi, mostly riding her bicycle, not exclusively. It's one of those picaresque adventures where you find out as much about the person as the places, but that they bring a kind of a fresh eye, a youthful enthusiasm and an openness to experience to their journey. And of course, it's not a journey you could make now, because some of the places that she travels through, like Afghanistan, would not now probably be, such a good idea to cycle through there on your own as a woman. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. The second one I want to choose is by Kapta Kasabova, and that's Border, A Journey to the Edge of Europe. Now, from 2010. Now, this book I found absolutely fascinating. It's a travel book, but it's also a book of politics and history. So Kasabova is Bulgarian, grew up in Bulgaria, left in her early 20s, lives, I think, in Scotland now, and she went back to Bulgaria to look at visit several places along the border, the old border between, well, it's still a border between Bulgaria and Turkey and Bulgaria and Greece, really thinking back to the significance that border had over time, and in particular when she was a child, when it was part of the Iron Curtain between communist Europe and non-communist Europe. I would warmly recommend it as a book about people and places, but also ideas. Borders are such a strange thing, aren't they? They're both real and unreal. Prompt number 3, time. What book took you the longest time to read and why? Okay, I'm going to cheat here because this hasn't yet taken me the longest time to read, but it's going to. Let me explain. You've already heard me enthusing about reading the Divine Comedy with the help of Tom L.A. Books, and he started this in December, 3rd of December 2020, reading a canto or two a week, and I'm following along and I'm reading a canto or two a week and then watching his videos. And if he keeps going, and I have every faith that he will, and I certainly will if he does, we will get to the end of the Divine Comedy sometime in the spring of 2022. So that will definitely be the longest I've ever taken to read a book. Question number 4, prompt number 4, traditional. Fairy tales or nursery rhymes, what are some of your favourites? What are some you would not think suitable for kids today? Well, of course, both fairy tales and nursery rhymes were, as a rule, not written for children originally. None of them started out being terribly suitable for children. Nursery rhymes were often, if you understand the words, quite bawdy, or were like political satire. Yeah, but they became something for children. And likewise, fairy tales, could be quite scary and, yes, unpleasant, dangerous stories. And absolutely, it's easy to see how over time, they've been sort of bowdlerized and seen as suitable for children. I find them fascinating. A favourite from my childhood, from a kind of nice children's version of fairy tales, was Snow White and Rose Red, and I liked that for two reasons, both relatively shallow. One is it has a bear in it, a bear that these two sisters, Snow White and Rose Red, are nice to, and so obviously he then turns out to be a prince who's been enchanted into the form of a bear. But they're nice to him just when he's the bear. The the other reason, even more shallow, is that one of the two characters, Rose Red, has brown hair. Now, you can't tell because it's grey now, but my hair used to be brown. And when I was a child, all the characters in books, especially in fairy tales, either had, blonde, long golden locks, or something jet black. They were never brown haired. So I loved it that the person in this story was. I I really um I loved singing nursery rhymes to Alfred and Matilda when they were babies, small children. I have no idea if they remember. I've got a little story for you. When my sister-in-law had her first baby, she had an interesting background. She's part Japanese, part Danish, part Australian, part British, but she grew up in Malaysia. So she realized that she didn't know that most of the kind of nursery rhymes that English mothers were meant to read to their children, sing to their children. And she said this to me and my sister. So my sister and I, as a surprise for her, we recorded a tape, an hour-long tape of the pair of us singing nursery rhymes, so that she could learn them or play it to her babies and sing them herself. I'd be hard pushed to remember a whole hour's worth of nursery rhymes now, I suspect. We are, it's an interesting thing that we are kind of losing our oral traditions, because, obviously this is something that started when printing came in, but I think that other media, and recording of sound and television and the internet is in some ways it saves things for posterity, and in other ways it means that we as individuals no longer memorize them. Prompt number 5. Tasty. Food, glorious food. What are some of your favourite books about food? Now, one that I really enjoyed last year, because I read it for Victober, was For All the Tea in China by Sarah Rose, written in 2010, and about how the role of tea in Britain's relationship with China and India through the character of a particular individual that went and stole tea and tea-related technology from China. Then I thought, is tea a food? Now, I more or less live on tea, so as far as I'm concerned, it is, but I guess most people would consider it a drink, not a food. So I've picked a couple of others, which I suppose in a similar vein of picking a food stuff, something we consume, and using that to tell a bigger story about history or economics or relationships between countries. One is Cod by Mark Kalansky. It's a book from 1997, but still available, I think. And it's The Fish That Changed the World. The history of the cod fishing industry is fascinating, and yeah, that's one. Another is Nathaniel's Nutmeg by Giles Milton. Now, that one was from 1999, and that's about the spice trade and how Europe's appetite for spice kind of drove the development of European overseas empires, and then hence overseas exploration or conquest, and hence, yeah, empires and colonialism. Number 6, Terrible. Tears for Terrible. Who's a truly terrible, that is nasty, but memorable character that stands out for you? And there's so many you could pick, aren't there? So I'm going to pick one from a book I'm reading right now, which is The Inhabited Woman, which is by Gioconda Belli, and it's a book from Nicaragua. I'll do a scallywandling video about it after I've finished it. But there's a character in there, General Vela, and he is a truly terrible person, and he's vain and self-important, but we meet him, the main character meets him, and he's kind of all over her, in sort of, you know, niceness. But at the same time, we know he's off, throwing rural peasants out of helicopters, or not personally, but that was a policy that he came up with. It's oh yeah, I'll talk more about it when I talk about the book. Number 7, number 7, truth. The truth is often stranger than fiction, they say. Give us some examples from your extensive reading. Goodness me, that's a bit intimidating, our extensive reading. I'm going to pick one book called The Seabird's Cry by Adam Nicholson. And that's a book I read quite recently. It's from about 2018, 17 maybe. It's a book about 10 species of ocean-going seabird. And Nicholson is one of those wonderful, enthusiastic amateurs. He really, really loves seabirds. But he's gone and read up about the science about seabirds' lives, and it really is stranger than fiction in many ways. And we see these birds when they're on land or close to land, and we just see a kind of like a fraction of their actual lives. But now we can stick, trackers on them and so on, and see where they go and what they do. We found out the weird, wonderful, and extraordinary journeys they take and ways they live when they're in the ocean-going phases of their annual life cycle. Question number 8, or prompt number 8 rather, is tag. T for tag. Make up an 8th prompt for those you tag, but also you have to do the 8th prompt that the person who tagged you created. So Alan's brilliant prompt for this was triumph. What a lovely flexible word to choose, Alan. Thank you. And the triumph that immediately came to my mind was Roman triumphs. The triumphs, and that's where we get the word triumph from, of course. It's from the Roman word triumphus, which was the sort of celebratory procession through the streets of Rome that a successful Roman general would hope to be awarded the right to hold a triumph. And there was religious elements to it, and there'd be like feasts and games, and it was his moment of glory, of triumph. And he could go through the streets with his loot on display and his prisoners, his captives. Extraordinary. If you want a sense of what a triumph meant in Roman society, to that kind of class of Roman, you could read Robert Harris's Cicero trilogy. So 3 books about the life of Cicero, but he interacts with people like Pompey and Caesar and so on. And Harris writes real page turners, but very well researched ones. I would, enthusiastically recommend them as historical fiction. And yes, to understand about triumphs. So, what's my tag and who am I going to tag? My tag is T is for turnip. Turnip or turnip head or turnip eater, any of those. Turnip is used in the UK as an insult. Most famously in recent years, the a relatively unsuccessful football manager of the England football team, Graham Taylor, was called Turnip Head, and there were pictures of him with the head as a turnip, which was kind of bringing back yes, it was in some ways quite an archaic insult. It first appears in literature in the 1650s. Dickens uses it in Pickwick Papers. He talks about Sam Weller being like a soft-headed turnip. George Eliot uses it in a slightly different form in Adam Bede, which I'm reading at the moment, which is what brought it to mind. Okay, so I'll read it to you. So the old schoolmaster in Adam Bede says to Adam that he should not waste his learning. Okay, and show folks there's some advantage in having a head on your shoulders instead of a turnip. So my turnip tag is to talk about an insult from your that's kind of you feel is distinctive to your country or your culture or your background. And I'm going to tag Berna of Berna's Bookish Adventures. Berna always gives us a nice Turkish word at the end of her videos, so she can do that here. Sina of Beating Around the Books. Gives a nice German insult, Sina. I'll like that. I'm going to tag Sean because he's interested in etymology of words, and I don't think he's done this tag yet. I'm going to tag Rosie Cockshut. How do economists insult each other? Tell me that. And Margaret Pinard because she can give me a North American insult by all means, but also I know that she's really looked into Scottish culture and dialect and so on for the books that she writes. So maybe she's got one from there. And I also look forward to hearing all their answers to all the other questions. And happy Tuesday, everyone.